when I walked outside and saw a half-eaten cheesecake floating in my pool next to a pair of leopard print sunglasses and a soggy HOA violation notice, I knew something unholy had happened. It wasn't just the cheesecake. It wasn't even the crushed wine glass near the diving board. It was the fact that this was the third morning in a row I had woken up to evidence of someone partying in my backyard, without me, without permission, and apparently without any shame. I stood there in my robe, coffee in one hand, HOA notice in the other, thinking, either my pool had become sentient and developed a taste for wine and trespass, or someone in the neighborhood had officially lost their mind. The first time I saw a towel draped over the patio chair that didn't belong to me, I shrugged it off. Maybe the wind carried it from a neighbor's yard. Maybe it was mine and I was just forgetting things. But the second day, when I found a pool noodle that looked like it had been chewed by a wolverine, and my Bluetooth speaker was in a different spot, playing ABBA on loop, I started getting suspicious. Now, standing over the crime scene of cheesecake soup and leopard fashion disaster, I realized something was definitely up. I checked the gate. Locked. The camera? Dead. Somehow, someone was getting into my fenced, keypad-locked, motion-lit backyard and throwing nightly pool raggers like it was spring break. I didn't want to be that neighbor, the guy who gets all paranoid and sets up motion sensors for squirrels. But this was different. Someone was violating my space, my privacy, and worst of all, my chlorine budget. I live in a neighborhood governed by the Bramblewood HOA, an organization that takes neighborhood integrity so seriously they once fined a guy for painting his birdhouse lime green. The board is led by none other than Karen Whitmore, yes, the archetypal Karen, who treats her HOA presidency like she's the warden of a gated prison. Short blonde bob, sunglasses on cloudy days, clipboard that probably contains more citations than a traffic cop during a quota week. I thought about filing a formal complaint with the HOA, but that would be pointless. Karen would either gaslight me, claim it was wild raccoons, or fine me for having unauthorized cheesecake in a recreational zone. I decided to go old school. I installed a discreet motion-activated camera facing the pool. Just enough to catch movement, but not obvious enough for the intruder to notice. It took 2 nights. On the third, I got the footage I was hoping for, well, dreading, actually. At 11:48 p.m., the side gate creaked open. In walked Karen Whitmore herself, wearing a glittery cover-up and dragging a cooler behind her like she owned the place. She was followed by 2 other women and 1 man, all in beachwear, carrying drinks and snacks like they were headed to a resort. They laughed, blasted music from a portable speaker, and helped themselves to my lounge chairs, towels and yes, my freaking cheesecake from the fridge in the outdoor kitchen. One woman yelled, "This guy's got great taste in snacks," while Karen cannonballed into the pool. I watched the footage twice, then a third time, then sat there in my dark kitchen, dumbfounded, hand gripping my coffee like it was the last shred of sanity I had left. Karen. The woman who once fined me for not trimming my hedge to regulation length. The woman who filed a violation when my Halloween skeleton fell over during a windstorm and was labeled excessively slouchy. That Karen. She was using my pool as her personal cabana club while I was sleeping 20 feet away. The next morning, I tried to play it cool. I saw her out on her morning walk, plastic visor perched on her head like it gave her royal authority. I waved, smiled, and said, "Hey, Karen. You wouldn't happen to know who's been swimming in my pool at night, would you?" She didn't flinch. She laughed, like I had told a charming but absurd story. "Oh honey, probably raccoons. They're getting clever these days," she said, waving off the idea like it was nothing. "If you need HOA security patrol to check on it, I could arrange that." She said it in the same tone a loan shark offers to help find your missing kneecap. That afternoon, I received an email from the HOA. Subject line: Violation notice, unauthorized outdoor umbrellas. Attached was a photo of my patio, taken at night. The umbrella in question? One of mine, slightly tilted because of the wind. The timestamp on the photo matched the night Karen had trespassed. She had photographed my property during her unauthorized pool party and then used it to find me. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just petty trespassing. This was war. I went back through the camera footage, documenting everything. Times, dates, faces. I even enhanced the audio to catch conversations. They joked about my boring furniture. Karen made a snide comment about how, if he's not using the pool, it's practically wasteful. Another guest asked if I might ever catch them. Karen laughed and said, "Please." He's the type who'd apologize for startling us. My blood boiled, but I stayed calm. Because now I had more than suspicion. I had evidence. I sent the footage to a lawyer friend, just in case. "This is gold," he said. "Do not confront her yet. Let her dig her own hole. But also prank her. I'm begging you." I smiled. Oh, I had plans. I wouldn't just confront her. I'd make sure the next time she dipped a toe in my pool, she'd regret it for the rest of her HOA career. Because when Karen chose my backyard to violate, she didn't know one crucial fact. I design chemical systems for a living. Specifically, safe but extremely inconvenient ones. And if she likes surprises, she was about to get one that would itch for days and stain her soul blue. Karen didn't waste any time escalating the situation. Just 2 nights after the cheesecake incident, I came home from a weekend trip to find confetti floating in my pool, a discarded plastic tiara hanging from the hedge, and what I'm reasonably sure was a lipstick message on my poolside mirror that read, "Thanks for the hospitality." My jaw clenched so hard I almost cracked a molar. This wasn't just the occasional midnight dip anymore. It was a full-blown entitled invasion. I checked my camera footage immediately and there it was. Karen and her crew, dressed like they'd just left a Real Housewives reunion party, clinking glasses, blasting music, and treating my backyard like it was the VIP section of a beach club. One of them even brought an inflatable swan. At one point, someone yelled, "Cannonball!" and launched themselves off my patio table. It wasn't a party. It was a mockery. The worst part? Karen strutted around like she owned the place. She gave people a tour of my outdoor kitchen. She criticized my landscaping. She dug through my mini-fridge and commented on my beer selection. Then she had the audacity to tell someone that she might formalize an HOA annexation if I wasn't going to use the space properly. They all laughed. It was the kind of laugh that made your spine itch. And at no point did anyone look around and say, "Maybe we shouldn't be trespassing." Because when the HOA president leads the charge, who's going to stop her? I took screenshots. I documented timestamps. And then I sent an official complaint to the HOA board. I kept it professional, detailed and polite, with video proof attached. Within 24 hours, I got a response. Not from a board member. From Karen herself. It was short and spectacularly smug. "Thank you for your concern. However, your claim is unfounded and lacks merit. Please note, security footage taken of HOA board members may violate neighborhood privacy guidelines. Additionally, your umbrella violation remains unresolved." That last line hit me like a slap in the face with a wet pool noodle. Not only was she ignoring my complaint, she was doubling down on my supposed violation, one she created. A day later, I got an actual fine. $50 for hosting an unregistered gathering. The attached photo was a blurry shot of my backyard, dated the same night Karen threw her pool party. I was out of town. There wasn't a single image of me, but that didn't stop the fine from arriving. That's when it clicked. Karen was using the HOA not just to cover her tracks, but to punish me for daring to push back. She had the board under her thumb, or worse, completely fooled. Either way, I realized I was on my own. I could have called the police, but Karen would twist it. She'd cry about misunderstandings and community tensions. She'd probably throw in a speech about safety, neighborliness, and how her rights were being infringed. No. This wasn't a situation for the law. Not yet. This called for strategy, patience, and just a little bit of revenge. I reached out to my cousin David, who happened to be a civil attorney. He wasn't just smart, he was petty in exactly the way I needed. I sent him the footage, the fines, and the emails. He took one look at the material and said, "Oh yeah, she's not just trespassing. She's publicly, proudly screwing herself." He outlined a plan. I wouldn't confront Karen directly. Not yet. We'd document everything. Build a file. Let her keep doing what she was doing. Because the more she partied, the deeper the liability hole got. Meanwhile, I began laying my own traps. Nothing dangerous. Nothing illegal. Just enough to introduce a little discomfort. A little chaos. I removed the visible camera so Karen would think I gave up. I even left the gate unlocked one night, just to bait her. I started keeping track of every HOA letter, every fine, every little comment she made in the community group chat about irresponsible homeowners who let their amenities go to waste. Then, I started preparing the fun part. I drove out to a specialty prank store 2 towns over. The kind that sells stink bombs and exploding glitter cards to teenagers with revenge fantasies. I wasn't there for those. I was there for something more precise. I asked the owner if he had anything that could be safely applied to a pool area that caused mild but very persistent itching. He grinned like I had just asked for the secret menu. He sold me a small canister of water-soluble itching powder that activated on skin contact after 5 to 10 minutes. It wasn't dangerous, just incredibly uncomfortable. Exactly what I needed. Next, I ordered a pool-safe dye that reacts with body heat. Harmless, but brilliant blue and nearly impossible to scrub off for at least 48 hours. When someone gets in the water, it wouldn't change immediately. It would wait until their body temperature warmed the surrounding area. And then, boom. Instant smurf. I mixed the itching powder into a fine layer and sprinkled it around the pool's edge where towels were often laid out. Then, I poured the dye into the pool and let the filter circulate it overnight. It was invisible in cool water. Perfectly clear. Just waiting. I didn't have to wait long. Karen showed up the next night at 10:47 p.m. She had 2 new guests with her. I watched from the shed, phone in hand, camera rolling silently. The group dropped their bags, popped open drinks, and jumped right in. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Karen floated casually across the water like she was surveying her queendom. Then came the scratching. First one of the guests. Then Karen. Then all of them. Arms, legs, neck. Mild at first. Then frantic. But they stayed in the water, thinking maybe it was mosquito bites. Until the blue kicked in. One by one, patches of brilliant cobalt began to bloom around them like underwater clouds. Then it started staining their arms. Their legs. Karen noticed first and screamed, flailing and slipping out of her float. Her friend shouted, "What the hell is happening to my skin?" They scrambled out, leaving trails of blue footprints on the concrete. They looked like a trio of angry Smurfs who'd lost a paintball war. They toweled off frantically, which only made the itching worse. One of the guests tried rinsing with the garden hose, which just reactivated the powder. Karen, fuming and scratching, yelled, "He did something! I know it!" and threatened to sue me for chemical assault. I stayed quiet in my shed, heart pounding, trying not to laugh too loudly. I captured every second on camera, time-stamped and documented. The best part? They left everything behind in their rush. Towels, cups, the inflatable flamingo. And sitting on the table, smeared with blue fingerprints, was another HOA violation letter. This one accused me of allowing visibly contaminated water to be seen from the street. Karen thought she had the upper hand. She thought she could waltz into my property, mock me, punish me, and leave without consequence. But now she was blue, itchy, and one step closer to her downfall. And I wasn't even close to finished. By the time morning rolled around, I half expected Karen to come marching up to my front door in a hazmat suit with a lawyer in tow. Instead, she stayed quiet. Suspiciously quiet. Which was either a sign of strategic retreat or the calm before the storm. But by mid-afternoon, I got my answer. The neighborhood group chat exploded with photos. The thumbnail that caught my attention first was a blurry but unmistakable shot of Karen, arms crossed and fuming, her skin blotchy blue from shoulder to knee. She was standing in the community center parking lot arguing with someone, probably one of the HOA board members. Another image zoomed in on her neck, which was red and clearly irritated. The caption read, "Pool mishap? Or art project gone wrong?" I didn't post anything. I didn't even react with a single emoji. I just scrolled, sipping my coffee like it was the finest wine. But the comments, oh, they were pure gold. People asked if she fell in a vat of paint. Someone joked that Avatar was filming in the neighborhood. One of the teenagers commented, "Smurf Queen 2025, and it instantly became the thread's top liked message. I didn't need to say a word. The universe was speaking for me. Karen, however, wasn't the type to sit back and let public humiliation fester. No. She had to double down. That evening, I received a new email from the HOA. This one accused me of endangering residents with unregulated chemical exposure and demanded I submit a full report of my pool maintenance schedule. It was laughable. I could practically hear her scratching while typing it. I responded politely, attaching a copy of my city-certified pool maintenance receipts, and added that there had been no chemical changes to the pool as far as my records showed. Which was technically true. There had been no harmful chemicals, and nothing the HOA could regulate. Just creative use of completely legal, pool-safe materials. But that didn't stop Karen. The next day, I noticed a city vehicle outside my house. A health inspector, sent to investigate an anonymous tip about a possible chemical hazard. I invited him in with the biggest smile I could muster and showed him everything. My receipts, the pool system, even my perfectly labeled containers. The inspector found nothing. No violations, no risk. Just an immaculate pool and a homeowner with a surprisingly calm demeanor. As he packed up, he chuckled and said, "You must have made someone real mad." I nodded and handed him a bottle of water for the road. The failed inspection didn't stop Karen either. She started making her rounds in the neighborhood again, but now she wore long sleeves, heavy makeup, and a wide-brimmed hat even at night. It didn't help. The gossip was too loud. The meme version of her had spread to 3 adjacent neighborhoods, and one guy even put a Smurf figurine in his front yard with a sign that read, "Watch out for unauthorized swimmers." Still, Karen wasn't done playing. A few days later, she tried holding an emergency HOA board meeting to formally fine me for creating a hazardous recreational environment. I was invited, of course, but not expected to show. Which is exactly why I did. I walked into the community center, dressed sharp, holding a neatly organized folder of documents and a smug sense of justice. Karen's face tightened when she saw me. She was already scratching her wrist. The meeting started predictably. Karen gave a speech about neighborhood safety, homeowner responsibility, and the supposed epidemic of pool misuse. But when she turned the floor over to the board, something unexpected happened. One of the board members, Janet, a usually quiet, middle-aged woman who cared more about flower beds than politics, raised her hand and asked Karen directly, "Were you in his pool?" Karen froze. It was the first time anyone said it out loud in a public setting. Karen stammered something about checking on a resident complaint and ensuring compliance. Janet frowned. At midnight? With 3 other people and a cooler of margaritas. The room stirred. Another board member spoke up. Frank, an older guy who ran the community newsletter, chimed in. "I've received 3 emails this week asking why the HOA president is trespassing in private property. If we're going to talk about homeowner behavior, maybe we start with that." Karen's mouth dropped open. She tried to laugh it off, saying the videos had been manipulated and taken out of context. That's when I opened my folder. I passed out printed screenshots, timestamps, and transcripts. I calmly explained that I had been documenting multiple nights of uninvited guests in my yard, that I had done nothing to provoke or endanger anyone, and that I had every right to defend my property. I didn't even mention the dye or the itching powder. I didn't need to. Karen had humiliated herself. I was just the guy with the receipts. The board asked Karen to step outside while they discussed the complaint. She stormed out, muttering under her breath. 10 minutes later, they called her back in. The decision wasn't final, they said, but they were opening an internal review into the HOA president's conduct. Until it concluded, Karen would be temporarily suspended from issuing any new citations. She lost it. In front of everyone, she threw down her clipboard, accused the board of betrayal, and said, "This is exactly what happens when you let men with superiority complexes run things." Then she glared at me and added, "This isn't over. You'll regret this." But the drama had already tipped in my favor. Her tantrum only sealed it. On my way out, Frank patted my shoulder and said, "Well played, son." I didn't respond. I just walked out into the night air, breathed deeply, and smiled. For the first time in weeks, the pool was quiet, peaceful, my territory reclaimed. Back at home, I poured myself a drink, sat poolside, and watched the calm water glisten under the patio lights. No parties, no floaties, no trespassers. Just me, my victory, and the faint memory of Karen's furious blue face. But I knew it wasn't truly over. Karen wasn't someone who walked away quietly. She'd try something. She'd wait, plot, scheme. And when she did, I'd be ready with something even better. Because this wasn't just about a pool anymore. This was personal. And Karen had no idea just how deep the water was going to get. The silence didn't last long. Karen might have been suspended from issuing HOA citations, but she was far from done. Like a shark stripped of its teeth but still hungry, she started prowling the neighborhood in new ways. She went door to door with a clipboard, claiming she was doing wellness checks and rebuilding trust in the community. Most people politely shut the door in her face. A few, likely unaware of the full saga, listened out of courtesy. But what Karen didn't know was that her reputation had taken on a life of its own. Parents were warning their kids to stay out of her way. Teenagers whispered about the blue pool curse. The jokes hadn't stopped. One guy even changed his Wi-Fi name to Karen Can't Swim Here. But I wasn't laughing just yet. Something about her eerie calm made me nervous. The last time she went quiet, she returned with an HOA citation for a potted plant. She was wounded, sure, but she hadn't given up the war. And sure enough, the next strike came not from Karen directly, but from an unexpected source, a formal letter from the HOA's legal counsel. It arrived in a beige envelope with a letterhead that screamed seriousness. I opened it cautiously, expecting nonsense. What I found instead was absurdity dressed in legalese. The letter claimed that due to the increasing number of complaints regarding the use of surveillance equipment and hazardous materials on private property, the board had been advised to consider legal mediation. It didn't name me directly, but it didn't have to. It was a clumsy attempt to rattle me. I called David, my cousin and attorney, and forwarded him the letter. He read it, laughed out loud, and said, "This is basically a strongly worded napkin. Empty threats. But we're going to use it." He drafted a response, sharp and surgical, listing every violation Karen had committed, including timestamps, visual evidence, and local ordinances she had broken. He also included the fact that she had retaliated against me using her HOA position, something that fell squarely under civil harassment. Then he added a cherry on top. A formal notice of potential legal action for trespassing, defamation, and punitive damages should the harassment continue. He didn't send it to the HOA board. He sent it straight to Karen's personal email. 48 hours later, her husband showed up on my doorstep. He looked exhausted, like a man who just walked through a field of emotional landmines. He wasn't there to threaten me. He was there to plead. "Look," he said, holding his hands up like I was pointing a weapon at him. "I don't know what happened between you two, but she's not doing well. She thinks you're out to destroy her." I paused, choosing my words carefully. "I'm not out to destroy her. I'm just protecting what's mine. He nodded. I get it. I do. But whatever you're planning next, please don't. Just let this die down. But letting it die down wasn't on the table. Not after what happened next. That weekend, while I was out grabbing groceries, someone snuck into my backyard again. But this time, they didn't come to swim. They came to destroy. I returned to find my patio furniture slashed, my pool filter tampered with, and blue dye smeared on the inside of my shed door, the very same dye I had used. It was a message. Not subtle. Not clever. Just angry. My camera system had been disabled, snipped cleanly at the connection point. Whoever did it knew where to look. And while I couldn't prove it was Karen, no one else had the motive, the grudge, or the pure entitlement to make a move like that. I called the police. They took a report, walked through the property, and offered the usual non-committal promises about increased patrols. But more importantly, they gave me a case number. And that was all David needed to take this thing to the next level. We filed a formal complaint with the city, attaching every bit of documentation we had. We filed a small claims case for property damage and trespassing, naming Karen as the primary suspect. And we submitted everything to the HOA board, not just as a complaint, but as a demand for an emergency hearing. This time, Karen wouldn't be able to weasel her way out with charm or distraction. The hearing was scheduled within the week. It was held in the same community center room as before, but this time the atmosphere was different. Tense. Charged. Word had gotten around. More residents showed up than usual, eager for a resolution, or at least a show. Karen walked in looking like she hadn't slept in days. Her usual polished appearance was replaced with dark circles under her eyes and a defensive posture. She didn't sit at the board table. She sat off to the side, arms crossed, glaring at me like I was the villain in her personal soap opera. The board began with the usual formalities, then gave me the floor. I stood up and calmly presented everything. The video footage, the violation notices with suspicious timing, the legal letters, and the recent act of vandalism. I didn't accuse. I didn't rant. I simply stated facts and laid them bare. When I finished, the room was quiet. Then Karen stood. She didn't deny it. She didn't apologize. She lashed out. "He's manipulating this whole neighborhood," she snapped. "He's trying to ruin my reputation because I enforce the rules. He's weaponized the internet and now everyone treats me like some cartoon villain. He made me blue." The last sentence came out shrill, almost comedic, and a few people snorted trying to hold back laughter. But Karen wasn't laughing. She was unraveling. The board tried to calm her down, but it was too late. She had just confirmed more than half of what I claimed in front of witnesses. The board reviewed the evidence in private and returned 20 minutes later with a unanimous decision. Karen would be officially removed from her position as HOA president. She would face a temporary ban from participating in any official HOA functions, and due to the pending legal action, she was advised to cease any direct contact with me. She didn't say a word as the decision was read. Her face was stone. But I could see it in her eyes, the disbelief, the fury, the complete inability to grasp that she had lost, that her power, the thing she had wielded like a sword for years, was gone. As I left the building, a few neighbors patted me on the back. One handed me a homemade, Pool Defender badge made of cardboard. I laughed and accepted it. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just a win for me. It was a turning point for the entire neighborhood. People were waking up, seeing that power didn't belong to the loudest voice or the one with the clipboard. It belonged to the people willing to stand up and push back. Karen may have thought she could control everything. But she forgot one thing. You don't mess with someone's home and expect them to stay silent. You certainly don't swim in their pool, vandalize their property, and then act like the victim. And now that her empire had crumbled, I was free to enjoy the one thing she'd always wanted to steal: peace. And a pool all to myself. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, the neighborhood actually felt peaceful. The mornings were quiet again. No passive-aggressive emails. No surprise violations tucked under my doormat. The pool, once a battleground of entitlement and trespass, was serene and undisturbed. I sat on the patio most evenings, drink in hand, just listening to the calm ripple of water under the lights. It felt like reclaiming my territory, not just physically but mentally. And while Karen hadn't been seen publicly since the hearing, I knew better than to assume she was done. People like her don't go away quietly. They retreat, regroup, and wait for a window to reassert control. But whatever storm she was brewing behind closed doors didn't matter anymore, because the neighborhood had changed. And so had I. It didn't take long for word of Karen's downfall to reach beyond the borders of our HOA. A few neighboring communities had caught wind of the story, thanks in no small part to the viral group chat screenshots and the legendary footage of Karen's blue-stained tantrum. Some even reached out to me directly, thanking me for standing up to the HOA machine. One guy from a few streets over offered to send me a custom t-shirt that read "Pool King." Another sent over a novelty street sign that said "Karen Free Zone." I didn't ask for any of it, but I kept it all. Quiet trophies from a war I hadn't asked for but had somehow won. The real reward, though, came a week later when the HOA held an emergency election to fill the now-vacant president's seat. I hadn't planned on attending. I figured I'd done enough damage and deserved to sit this one out. But then my name started circulating in hushed whispers. A few neighbors came by in the days leading up to the vote, asking if I'd consider running. I laughed at first. Me? Mr. Unauthorized Umbrella? The guy who dyed the HOA president blue? But then I realized something. They weren't asking because they thought I was perfect. They were asking because I wasn't Karen. They wanted someone who didn't rule with a clipboard and a scowl. Someone who could apply the rules without weaponizing them. Someone who understood what it was like to be on the receiving end of petty power trip. So I ran. Just for the hell of it. I made no campaign posters. No promises. I showed up in jeans and a t-shirt and told the crowd, "Look, I'm not going to micromanage your mailbox flags. I just want to make sure you don't get fined for having an inflatable snowman in December." The room erupted in laughter. That was it. No speeches. No grandstanding. Just truth. I won by a landslide. Taking over as HOA president wasn't about revenge. It was about restoring sanity. My first order of business was creating a new rule. No HOA member could cite or fine a resident without a majority vote from the board. No more rogue fines. No more surprise violations. I also proposed monthly open forums where residents could air concerns, suggest improvements, or just vent about weird neighbor behavior. It passed unanimously. People felt heard. And for once, the HOA became something closer to what it was supposed to be, a community. With things settled, I decided it was time to throw a real pool party. One where no one had to sneak in through a side gate or bring their own floaties in secret. I sent out official invitations to every household in the neighborhood. Fully permitted. Full catering. Music, games, the works. I called it the Reclaim the Deep End Party, and within hours, everyone RSVP'd. Everyone except Karen. The day of the party was perfect. Clear skies, 75 degrees, and a breeze that kept the umbrellas from launching into orbit. The whole street showed up. Kids swam. Parents mingled. Seniors found the shade and swapped stories about the old days when the HOA cared more about gardening awards than power plays. I had stocked coolers with every kind of soda and sparkling water known to man. My cousin David came by, beaming like a proud coach on championship day. Even the cop who had taken my vandalism report dropped in for a burger. And yes, we had blue cupcakes and little bottles of anti-itch lotion as party favors, just for the laughs. About an hour into the party, someone gasped. I turned to look and, sure enough, there she was. Karen. She wasn't on my property, but she stood across the street, arms folded, watching the festivities like a ghost peeking through a window. For a moment I wondered if she might march over, make a scene, throw down one last desperate decree. But she didn't. She just stood there, alone. Maybe trying to understand how everything had flipped so quickly. Or maybe wondering how she ever thought this pool, and this neighborhood, belonged to her. Just in case she got ideas, I had already installed a new smart gate with biometric lock, facial recognition, motion alerts, automated sprinkler deterrents for any unauthorized entry attempt. It wasn't overkill. It was insurance, and a subtle message. You're not welcome here anymore. She eventually turned and walked away. And with that, the last shadow she cast over my backyard disappeared. People returned to swimming, laughing, telling stories about the now legendary HOA wars. Someone started calling the pool Karen's Folly, and it stuck. The inflatable flamingo she once brought now floated proudly in the center, complete with a tiny sign taped to its head that read, "Trespassers will be dyed." Later that night, after everyone left and the lights dimmed, I sat by the pool again. Alone this time. Just the sound of the water, the soft buzz of the filter, and the lingering scent of barbecue in the air. The neighborhood had changed. I had changed. I never wanted a fight. I never wanted a title or a spotlight. All I wanted was peace, privacy, and the right to swim in my own pool without worrying about a clipboard and a smug smirk crashing the party. But sometimes, standing up for your space means going a few rounds. Sometimes, it means getting creative, strategic, even a little petty. And when you do it right, with just enough brains and just enough backbone, you get to walk away not just victorious, but respected. Karen underestimated me. She thought I'd roll over, apologize, move. What she didn't realize was, you don't mess with a man's home. You don't mock him, fine him, trespass, vandalize, and expect to keep swimming like nothing happened. She brought the war to my backyard. I ended it in hers. And now, every time I dive into that crystal blue water, it feels a little colder, a little sweeter, and a whole lot more mine.